Part 226. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2255. Manbao asked Zhou Liru to go to the car to get the medicine box, while he rolled up his sleeves and asked the host for hot water and clean towels. She wiped off all the other party's medicine and scrubbed the wound, and then frowned and looked at it. Master's Hiran knows some medical skills, and even medical skills are not bad. It is very rare that such a big wound can stop the blood and save his life. But the medicine on his hand was not complete, and the wound was too large, so the wound deteriorated. Manbao asked Zhou Liru to open the medicine box and took out the knife and scissors. She read a prescription for Bai Shan to pick up the medicine, and then asked Zhou Liru to help clean up the bad meat together. The old man stood by and stared blankly at the two little girls who took knives and scissors and started to cut the flesh and blood on his body. He couldn't help looking at the monk. The eminent monk looked relieved, standing aside and handing them something from time to time, or going to get hot water. How can the old man let him do it? He will go by himself when his son, daughter-in-law and grandchildren are not there. Jishan's wound was very large, so it took a long time. He was woken up by pain in the middle. Just as the medicine was ready, Manbao poured it on him. After the wound on her back was dealt with, she handed over the medicine to Zhou Liru. Now that the weather is hot, there is no need to wrap it, just cover it with a cloth. Only then did Manbao look at the arrow wound on his leg. She frowned. Jiren said it, and couldn't help asking, "Can the leg be saved?" Manbao said, "I will try my best." Manbao stared at his wound for a while, then turned around and went out, letting Zhou Liru go back to the convoy to get the medicine. Because she needed a lot of medicine, Manbao wrote a recipe for her. She glanced outside, and Bai Shan said, "I asked, it's getting dark here late." Manbao nodded. After some preparation, she went in again. This time, Zhiren also stood aside to help with clean hands. She cut open the wound, removed the rotten flesh, and found a broken barb from the inside, waiting for fresh blood to flow out of the wound before stopping. Next, she looked at the blood, turned her head and said to Zhou Liru, "Leave the bad meat alone and see what poison it is in a while." Zhou Li responded as follows. It was almost dark after Manbao had dealt with the wound. The team members had already allocated rooms to live in. The villagers in the whole village were very satisfied because they all had guests. Mr. Zhuang and the others lived in the house of the eldest son of the old man next door, and she came out with her neck twisted, and the old man greeted her warmly, saying that their room had been tidied up, and asked them if they wanted to take a look. In fact, he still wanted to prepare meals for them, but after looking at the meals prepared by their cook, he didn't dare to interfere in it. It seemed negligent for him to prepare. It was rare to be able to settle down, with vegetables and fresh meat. He did everything she could to prepare a sumptuous dinner for them. Steward Li had specially warned that there were high-ranking monks, so she also prepared a vegetarian meal. Zhiren gratefully took the food and asked about Ji's injury. Manbao thought for a while and said, "It will take 2 days to find out that the arrow avoids the bones, but if the meat doesn't grow well, it can only be removed later, otherwise it will not only damage the rest of the leg, but also the back. The injury is also very difficult to heal, if he has a high fever." Zhiren himself knew how to use medicine, so he naturally knew how dangerous it was, so he nodded and agreed to this treatment plan. After eating, Manbao sat in the main room and pondered with the bad meat. She asked Zhiren to be an interpreter and asked the old man, "Do you know what poisonous plants you have here that you like to smear on your swords?" Zhiren said to her, "I asked, and I went out to find some in the past 2 days, but I couldn't find out what kind of poisonous juice it was." After saying that, she got up and went out and brought 4 kinds of plants back to her, and Keek made a ding-dong, "I found that there are no plants listed." "Manbao, you can tell me earlier." Keek said, "There are more than these 4, has the host considered to include it? When I walked in the desert before, Keek didn't find any plants that could be included, but animals found some, either in a very far place or in a very deep place, and then they would still move. Manbao and Bai Shan tried twice and gave up when they found that they could not be included. In the end, only Keek's lonely ding-dong sound remained. Knowing that Manbao won't stay here, she doesn't ding-dong in far places, and she endured no ding-dong in nearby places because she was concentrating on treating patients. Manbao thought about it. Anger is a patient, but so many people in the caravan can't be wasted here, and there may be a team of horse thieves staring at them in the dark, so she refuses to make a decision right now. Wait until I ask Mr. She replied to Keek in her heart, and she took a look at the branches and leaves in her hands. They were fat and tender. She picked up a piece of scissors, carefully squeezed out the juice, and then smelled it. Smell. Manbao pondered for a while, and finally mixed several juices with each other, and 14 small bowls were placed in front of him in an instant. 14 bowls, 14 different poisons. Chi ran, so that's how poison tried? After Manbao debugged it, he slowly compared it. For this reason, he washed the poisonous meat and burned the water that was washed. That smell. The people in the room rushed out directly, even the old man went out in a trance, only Chi Ren stayed in the room with Manbao. Manbao had no choice. Not only did she stay, but she also had to close her eyes and memorize the smell carefully, and then deal with the 14 kinds of poisons in the same way, trying to find their commonalities. As long as the poison really came from these kinds of poisonous juices, there must be something in common. There are not many poisonous plants in a place, and there are fewer common species. Like this one that will be smeared on arrows, most of them are common and have the effect of paralysis or dizziness. Zhiran obviously knew this, so the 4 poisonous weeds he found were all based on this, and the other was because it had hallucinogenic effects, and it was familiar with full treasures, that is, the cactus. Apart from it, she has never seen the other 3. Manbao chose 3 bowls for a long time. She looked at their locations and wrote down the poisonous juice they prepared, so she put the same poisonous weed aside and pondered for a while, then she said, "This should be it." 2 poisonous weeds. Zhiran immediately asked, "Can you solve it?" Manbao glanced at him, took it out and asked the old man, "What if livestock or people accidentally eat these 2 poisonous weeds?" The old man was startled and said, "It's good to spit it out." Manbao. Zhiran held back a smile and said, "Lord Zhou, I asked before that there is no specific way to detoxify these 4 poisonous weeds. Otherwise, he could pour the non-poisonous antidote into the apprentice in turn." Manbao thought about it too. He felt that he had fallen into a misunderstanding, and he didn't necessarily need an antidote for them. An antidote that had similar consequences to them was also acceptable. Because most of the toxins that cause the same consequences are of the same kind, since they are paralyzing and hallucinogenic, it is good to use the antidote that solves the paralysis and hallucinogenic poisons. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2256. In fact, after digging so much meat, most of the poisonous meat was cleaned up, but it was destroyed in the end, so it was not easy to heal, and the toxins entered the body along the blood, and his body was still somewhat poisonous. Manbao turned around to prescribe medicine. At this moment, she really felt that she was too wise to prepare such a complete set of medicines. Zhiran was surprised to see the package of medicines in her luggage wrapped in oiled paper and the name of the medicine on the outside. It was really complete, just like a mobile pharmacy. Manbao grabbed the medicine for Jigan in the dark, and watched Zhiran boil the medicine and give it to him, and then went to wash. After bathing, he changed his dirty clothes stained with blood. Manbao didn't go to rest, but went to Bai Shan and the others to discuss the next itinerary. As a result, she opened the door, and Bai Shan turned around in the yard, nodded to her and said, Nikanjun is also waiting at Mr. Zhuang's place, and the road ahead may be a little unexpected. When Manbao was treating Jigan's wounds, Nishenjun and the others were not idle. They inquired about the next road with the villagers, and only then did they know that the road ahead was blocked. He said, don't talk about going to Angzi, even the road to Kyosai is blocked. Manbao asked, why do you want to block the way to the west and north? Was it looted by horse thieves? Nikanjun said, it shouldn't be a simple horse thief. Listening to Master Hiran's words, Khotan Town and Kyosai are not very peaceful. Zizhu may send troops or borrow troops from Shazhu. Then these thieves will block the business. The road is heartbreaking. That is to say, they want to cut off the way for Zizhu to ask for help, and also cut off the reinforcements from Shazhu. Manbao asked, then how do we go? The people of this village came from the market next to the ancient city. The place where they lived was considered to be a very large village, and that was the place where the merchants that heavy rain said were settled. Now that place is occupied nigh joining the army, but they know that there is a way to bypass those people's levels, but there are so many of us that we may be discovered. In fact, this matter was said by Masters Hiran. Although they were generous after moving in, the villagers would not tell them about this. They only promised to send 2 masters and apprentices of Chirin. Compared with the hundreds of people in their convoy, Chirin's 2 goals were too small, and they could easily pass. Nikanjun said worriedly, I want to convince the village chief in the village to let someone take me for a trip, and we will go after confirming that it is feasible. Only then did Bai Shan turn his head and say to Manbao, it's just right, it takes time to heal from anger. The people of the western regions have a good impression of monks, and even horse thieves will give them a little face. Manbao looked suspicious. Bai Shan smiled and said, Ji Yan was injured because the 2 of them, master and apprentice, met a horse thief and massacred the villagers. The master and apprentice couldn't see that they were injured after they rescued each other. Those horse thieves finally let them go because Master Ji Ren was the monks, persuaded them. Otherwise, 2 monks with only 2 horses and a pile of dry food would go and rob them. So Bai Shan wanted to bring the master and the apprentice. He thought that Ji Ren and Ji Yan would also want to go with them. After all, Manbao's medical skills were nothing to say, and they also brought so many medicines. Hiran really thought so. He sat beside his apprentice's bed and thought about it. Seeing that he woke up groggy, he fed him rice soup, and Jidan was much more sober. Chiron, who had been in a coma for 2 days, took a lot of effort to wake him up, looked at Chiron, he felt relieved, and strengthened the idea, gee, how about we go with Shizujo and the others? Ji Yan was groggy today, and asked incomprehensibly, Donor Joe. It's Imperial Physician Joe. She was the one who took care of your injuries. Ji Yan couldn't help but recite the Buddha. He was drowsy at the time, he only felt that someone was cutting his flesh, and when he opened his eyes, he seemed to be filled with a bowl of medicine, thinking it was Master. He asked, why is Patron Joe here? It's a long story. It just so happens that they are going to Zizhu. I thought it would be better to go all the way. Ji Yan smiled bitterly, I'm afraid my disciples will drag Master down, so Master might as well be a step ahead with them. Hiran, children, it is for you that I want to walk with them. He said, Joshi's medical skills are very good, and he has only treated your wounds. You will wake up after 2 pairs of medicines. With her on the side, you are much more likely to recover. He also learned some medical skills for quitting anger, and he learned from his master. When he was injured, he knew that he might not survive, and now it is a great blessing to be able to wake up. If you can live, who wants to die? So Ji Yan opened his mouth and did not speak. But he thought of something, and quickly said, Master, what about the horse thief in front? Can we go over? You don't have to worry about these things, you can be your own teacher. Ji Yang felt relieved, lay on the bed and fell into a drowsy sleep. The next day, Masters Hiran personally took Manbao and the others to a high point, which was a stone wall. He pointed to the distance and said, "That's the place, do you see that piece of debris?" Manbao looked at it for a while and nodded, "There is a wall that looks like a house but it's far away." "That is the ancient city of Lilan." Masters Hiran said, "That direction is Pachangsi. You can see that this river flows in that direction." After the ancient city of Lilan was abandoned, people gathered and lived there, saying that it was just a collection city, but almost like a small town. The western regions are different from the central plains. In the western regions, 100 or so families can be counted as a small town, unlike in the central plains, where such a large gathering place is just a big village. When I passed by here 2 years ago, they still lived in that small town. They were driven out by horse thieves half a year ago. These houses were built not long ago. Fortunately, they had farmland here before, otherwise they would have to wandered elsewhere. It was also because of these farmlands that they refused to leave even though there were wolves on their side. So the villagers are very familiar with this area, more familiar than those horse thieves, so only if they lead the way can we bypass the horse thieves and go out." Manbao pondered, "Does the master want to walk with us?" Hiran smiled slightly and said, "Donor Joe doesn't think we are burdensome." He paused and then said, "If unfortunately is discovered, I am willing to use a few Buddhist scriptures to try to exchange the way of passage, but Imperial Dr. Joe also has to be prepared for losses. After all, they have too much luggage, and they are very embarrassing at a glance." When Manbao heard this, his heart couldn't help but move. She couldn't help turning her head to look at Bai Shan. Bai Shan looked at her silently. "What's wrong?" Manbao took his eyes back and thought to himself, "It's a big deal, let's go back and talk about it." Bai Shan withdrew his gaze and became thoughtful. See you next month. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2257. Manbao dragged Bai Shan to the river to pick up stones. Bai Shan asked, "Why are you picking this up?" "For gold and silver jewelry." "Bai Shan, is there such a good thing?" Seeing that Manbao was serious, Bai Shan Zhen was thinking about whether to call Bai Er and the others to pick them up together. Manbao said, "What are you thinking?" "The satin is replaced by something else." Bai Shan was taken aback and asked, "Where are the jewelry?" Manbao glanced at him, and Bai Shan understood. After thinking about it, he said, "It shouldn't be too many people who know about this, but it's not enough for just the two of us. I'll make arrangements." Manbao was at a loss. She was used to hiding things like this since she was a child. She felt that it was enough to hide it. Besides, what other arrangements did she need to make? Bai Shan took her by the hand and went back, first called Steward Li and asked him and the villagers to buy some empty boxes, and then called Bai Erlang and the others to go to the river to pick up stones, and exchanged 2 silk cloths with the villagers. They brought some leather of very poor condition, brought a lot of hay, and finally let someone move all their valuables into the house. This is something he can decide, but he can't. He went to Nikanjun and the 2 pedestrians and said, "We are going to rearrange the valuables in the luggage. Do you need us to seal it up for preservation?" Nikanjun felt that in the face of horse thieves, you may not be able to keep it even if you split it up, because everyone is caring for their lives when they collide. How many people will care about these gold and silver jewelry? But along the way, Bai Shan and Zhou Man's abilities were obvious to all, so he agreed after a little thought, and the soldiers who replaced him also agreed. Anyway, everyone remembers what they have in their hands. They remembered, but Bai Shan didn't, so in order to avoid disputes, he asked Bai Erlang and the others to take a pen and paper to count and record. Unpack the luggage first, and each person first takes their own treasures in their hands, and then they need to hand over the records they keep to them before putting them in the box. As for the arrangement after that, it is up to him. There was so much fanfare, but no one knew how they were going to hide the stuff. However, because they took pen and paper to record, they didn't plan to hide the treasure for them, but the soldiers who wanted to stuff them on their bodies also took things to register when they saw it. They said to their comrades, "Knives and guns have no eyes, listen to the meaning of joining the army, the western regions are in chaos now, no one knows when we will die in battle, and put things on them, in case I die, you can't figure out what I am. When the corpse comes, isn't the treasure I brought with me lost? Didn't you just say that you should leave the treasures to the adults for safekeeping, in case the luggage is lost? I'm not worried," he said after a vague sentence, "but now that Mr. Bai is magnanimous, and he has recorded the order, I guess that even if it is really lost in the future, Mr. Bai may return it to us." Colleague, that didn't make a fool of Mr. Bai. "Oh, the big deal is that we'll ask for less. Do you think it's possible that Mr. Bai wants to hide the treasure here and retrieve it when we come back? It's also possible, but they also brought a lot of silk and satin cloth. They are going to take them to the western regions to sell, right? Should they be brought back to the Central Plains if they stay here?" The soldiers wondered. In the room, Bai Shanzheng opened the checked boxes, watched Man Bao walk past one box after another, then picked up the things and disappeared. He watched for a long time. Although the little father-in-law might be at the scene, he couldn't help but ask, "Man Bao, Uncle Joe can only take things from you, can't you touch it yourself?" Man Bao blinked and found that it was true. Keek could scan things, but he couldn't record them by himself. He couldn't record them unless he had them in her hands, so. Man Bao nodded. "Although I don't understand the reason yin and yang are separated from each other. This may be the restriction that God has given to people on both sides of yin and yang. Otherwise, Uncle Joe would not have been wronged for so many years in vain." Bai Shan took out the things one by one and handed them to her to make her go faster, but he was still a little curious. "Man Bao, are these gold and silver jewels useless in the underworld?" Man Bao thought for a while, and felt that there was an underworld, and people also had their own currency and gold and silver. Why should they rely on the human world to exist? For example, in Teacher Mo's world, money is a number in the system, not to mention gold and silver, not even copper coins. So Man Bao nodded and said affirmatively, "It's useless." Bai Shan sighed, "Isn't the burial of the rich families of the past dynasties useless? Full treasure is happy, it should still be useful, and can be used as military resources in the future." Bai Shan reluctantly clicked her nose, "Don't let Mr. hear you, or it will be another good lesson." Man Bao glanced outside with a guilty conscience, heaved a sigh of relief, and said with a serious face, "When I die in the future, I will bury some manuscripts written by myself, and I can show off to others when I get to the underworld. Like gold, things like silver and jewelry should be left to future generations. They can use them as they need them, and I will take them with me. If they are short of money in the future and become unfilial, it would be a shame to dig my tomb out and use them." Bai Shan couldn't help laughing out loud. The more he thought about it, the more happy he was, and his tears were about to come out. "Sir, let's take one step and see 3 steps. You're better. The road hasn't gone yet, and it will be 100 years later." Man Bao said, "I call it planning for a rainy day." While talking, they put away the things, and after a while, they put away all the things, and then the two began to put stones and sand in the previous box. There are labels on the boxes, written by Bai Shan, indicating what was in the box before. Now they just put the same weight in the box according to the contents. For example, in a box containing gold and silver, put stones directly. The box containing the satin cloth is wrapped in leather with dried vegetables and put in. They only packed 2 boxes, and Bai Erlang and the others also counted things outside and asked someone to bring them over. Bai Shan closed the remaining boxes and opened the door to let them in. The soldiers didn't have many scattered things, they just packed 2 boxes. They would also hide some gold and silver on their bodies, and not all of them would be handed over to Bai Shan for safekeeping. Bai Shan doesn't care, anyway, it's enough to record it in detail in the booklet. He put the person in and said to Bai Erlang, "You will call Yin or them to help in a while." Bai Erlang probed his head and asked, "Can't you come over now?" Bai Shan pushed his head out and said, "Come back when I'm almost done with the arrangements. Only Man Bao and I know the details. The fewer people who know, the safer." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2258. Bai Erlang was stunned. "I can't know." "No, what if something happens to both of you?" Bai Shan said firmly, "We won't have an accident. Even if there will be an accident with Man Bao, there will be no accident. With Uncle Joe, he is afraid that few people can hurt her, so he is very relieved." After driving the people out, Bai Shan and Man Bao packed about half of the box together. After they were all closed and locked, Bai Erlang and the others came in to help stuff the stones and hay leather together. Even Yin he was a little suspicious of life, and while clumsily wrapped a large amount of hay in a dirty wolf's skin, bundled it up and put it in the box, he asked, "That's it? Isn't the thing still in the luggage? What if we want to get a box of gold and silver and we get back a box of hay or stones?" Bai Shan said firmly, "No, it's right to listen to me. Okay, since the little friends have said so, everyone can only believe it." So the 6 of them worked together to forge all the boxes, and then handwritten the seal and pasted it. Bai Shan admired his own words and was very satisfied. "I'm afraid there are not many such good-looking seal incidents." Man Bao looked down at his own handwriting, and secretly decided to turn around and spend more time practicing calligraphy, otherwise the gap between the two would widen. The seal was affixed, and everyone opened the door to let the soldiers in and put the suitcase back on the car. When the soldiers carried it, they found out that some boxes became heavier, and some boxes became lighter. Although they didn't understand what it meant, they still didn't ask, and they just obeyed the orders and put the things on the carriage. Tied up. Naturally, these things could not be concealed from Mr. Zhuang. Although Mr. Zhuang was also curious, he did not ask, but came to discuss the departure time with Masters Hiran. "Jidan's injury is getting better. I don't know if it was because the medicine was incomplete before and the medicine he used was not very good. Now that he used the good medicine, he recovered very quickly. Although there is still some low-grade fever, the wound is indeed healing, and even the deep hole in the leg is slowly growing and shrinking." Man Bao was very happy to see it, and he Jiren said, "It's so good, we can set off in 2 or 3 days." Zhiren also breathed a sigh of relief, and more actively discussed with Mr. Nikanjun Zhuang about exploring the way. Nikanjun took someone to walk that road in person, and after returning, he told Zhou Man and others, it will take 2 days to bypass their checkpoint, and the shortest distance from them is only about 8 miles, that is to say, they are riding horses, it will be there in a quarter of an hour, so you must be careful when crossing the road so that they can't find it. Bai Shan asked, "When will we pass the shortest distance?" "It was 3/4 before I walked by." Bai Shan said, "Then we'll leave in the afternoon, so it's already dark and it won't be easy to find out." Nikanjun was surprised. He didn't expect this, so he couldn't help but ponder, but marching at night is probably dangerous. Look for a few guides who are familiar with this road. It's cold at night, but it's summer now, and the cold is limited. The distance of 8 miles is not long, but it's not short. They probably won't notice it at night. We have a lot of people and a lot of movement, and this is the best way I can think of." Nikanjun thought about it for a while and there was no better way, so he nodded. Zhiren and Mr. Zhuang had no objection, so everyone set a time for the departure. Bai Shan took out two relatively good silk cloths to the village chief, and asked him to ask two more powerful guides to guide them. The old man looked at the silk cloth in his hand, then turned to look at Zhou Man, and finally nodded in agreement. He found two people, one of whom was his eldest grandson, and he said to Zhou Man and the others, they often go there. Herding and hunting are the most familiar paths. Then everyone just waited to get rid of anger and could move. Man Bao and the others are still curious about Jiji, mainly because they heard people in the village say that he is very heroic and his martial arts are very good. The big knife to the villagers, and then the horse thieves were beaten to pieces. The little grandson of the village chief was chatting and gesturing, holding a fire stick in his hand, climbed up the fence of his own house and jumped down from the top with a loud bang, to show that he had fallen from the sky so powerfully at that time. Man Bao and the others can barely understand some of their words now, and with the help of their hands, everyone can communicate smoothly. Man Bao gestured and asked, "Are those horse thieves going to rob you?" The little grandson pouted and pointed at the cattle and sheep outside the village and said, "They want to eat our cattle and sheep, but if the adults don't give it, they will kill with a knife, which is especially bad." Man Bao nodded, also feeling that they were bad. Bai Shan said in private, "If the Angzi Protectorate cannot suppress the horse thieves, the village will be wiped out sooner or later." Man Bao also thinks so, but even Masters Hiran can't persuade the villagers to leave, because if you leave here, you may not be able to live elsewhere. Migration requires a lot of capital, which the villagers of this village obviously do not have. Bai Shan sighed in his heart and couldn't bear it, so when he left, he gave the remaining silk cloth left by the two horse thieves to the old man, and said with a smile, "Thank you for the hospitality of the villagers these few days, these are the gifts we give everyone." When the villagers who came to Yuxi said goodbye, their eyes lit up, and their eyes became more and more cordial. Naturally, they can't use these silk cloths, but they can exchange them for food, and they don't need to go very far. They know that there is a big collection over the Puchang Sea, and they can reach it in a day on horseback. The silk cloth can be exchanged not only for food, but also for drinks and medicinal materials. There are so many things that can be exchanged. The village chief was also very grateful, thinking of the horse thief not far away, he did not reject Bai Shan's kindness. If they had to, they could still rely on these silk cloths to leave here and live elsewhere. Jatan's injury can't move too much, so he was carried to the carriage by someone. Bai Shan was very generous and let him and Bai Erlang's carriage come out, spread out the couch, put a layer of quilt on it, and let Ji Yan rest on his stomach to heal his wounds. He is tall and has long legs, so even if he sleeps diagonally, he can't put his legs down. Fortunately, the other leg that is not injured can be retracted, which is better than sitting and can barely set off. Bai Shan went to take a carriage with Man Bao. Everyone had lunch in the village, and then rested for a while, before leaving after a long time. They didn't walk fast and tried not to make too much noise. Bai Shan and the others were extremely quiet. They just tied the curtains and looked out the window, or played chess in the car when they were bored. Man Bao also asked Keek to stare at the level over there from time to time. If they were really discovered, she would know as long as those horse thieves changed. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2259. The sky slowly darkened, and the road ahead began to turn. It was a road winding down a mountain wall. Because it was the Gobi, the road was a little bumpy and the carriage was a little bumpy. After turning around the mountain wall, they will have a road that is exposed to a wide field of vision. Because the road is detoured, it is only about 8 miles away from the checkpoint over there. If someone stands at a high place, they can vaguely see the side of. If the horse runs fast, it will make a noise. After all, they have a lot of horses and carriages, and the movement is naturally not small. Nikanjun raised his hand to stop the convoy and instructed, "Eat dinner first, and then leave when it is completely dark." Everyone dismounted quietly and took out the dry food to eat. This is the dry food prepared in the village. Although it is a little cold at the moment, it is not very hard. You can still eat it with relish. After eating the dry food, everyone silently continued to get on the horse and get on the car. Everyone walked along the mountain wall in silence, walked out of the mountain wall, followed the guide along the road. They did not dare to lean too far to the right. The water and grass there were lush, but I heard that there is a swamp under the water and grass, whether it is people or livestock, as long as it's easy to fall in when you step in. Everyone walked forward silently, only the stars in the sky were lit, so that they could barely see the road in front of them. The old man's eldest grandson smiled and said, "We came here to fight deer when it was dark, so we dared to walk this way. You have the courage to walk the road you haven't traveled at night." Bai Shan smiled and said, "You gave us the courage. If others lead the way, we might not dare to go. This is a high trust," and the grandson of the old man laughed happily. They walked on this road for 2 hours, and it was not until the middle of the night that the two guides stopped and said, "This is it, we came out." Nikanjun also felt it. They turned a corner just now. He walked back and forth, barely remembering some routes. He said, "Let's go a little further, and then stop and camp." The crowd responded and walked forward for a while before stopping. Soldiers and guards huddled together to rest and grab a bite to eat. Manbao and the others live in the car. There was no ignition, there were a lot of mosquitoes. Manbao opened a box and cage in the dark, took out a bag, and opened it full of medicine packets. She handed the medicine pack to Steward Li and asked him to share it with everyone. This could repel mosquitoes. The old man's eldest grandson got one. It was very strange. The mosquitoes that had been buzzing and buzzing around him slowly disappeared. He was amazed. When it was dawn, they said goodbye to Manbao and others. Manbao remembered the horse thief who was staring at them from nowhere, and said to him, "If anyone, including the horse thief, goes to your village and asks us for news, you should tell them truthfully." Hearing Wei Xinggren's translation, the eldest grandson widened his eyes and patted his chest angrily. "Sir, we are the ones who keep promises and will not betray you." Manbao was stunned for a moment and then quickly said, "You misunderstood, this is not a sarcasm, but an exhortation." She said, "They are very cruel. You may not be able to beat them. If you don't say they can guess, it's better to tell them, in exchange for your safety." She said, "Don't say that we have gone far, they may not be able to catch up with us. Even if they catch up with us, it is better than slaughtering you directly in the village. We have so many people, there are no old people and children, we are better than you. Too much." When the two heard Wei Xinggren's translation, they opened their mouths for a while. Obviously, this operation exceeded the understanding of the two young people. It was the first time they saw the person and the team who took the initiative to ask to be betrayed. Wei Xinggren, however, sighed in his heart for Zhou Man's Gao Yi and Zhou Quan, and persuaded the two of them, "Master Zhou is right, if you are too tough, be careful of the danger of extermination of the clan." Bai Shan smiled and said, "If you are hesitant, why don't you go back and tell your grandfather the exact same thing? I think he will understand." The two were no longer entangled, and after bowing to a few others, they turned around and strode away. Everyone watched them go far, and then they started to get on the horse and get on the car. They switched to Jiaokang, because the original road was blocked by horse thieves. They are now taking another road, separated by a long distance from that road, but the direction is roughly the same. Heavy rain has not walked this road, but in the desert and Gobi, as long as you determine the direction, you will not get lost, and you can walk out without a road. And Chi Ren is also there. Bai Shan and the others found that Zhiren recognized the road better than De Yu and the scouts, and he had never walked this road, but he was able to speak righteously. Seeing the bright eyes of the 6 teenagers, Zhiren couldn't help but smile and said, "Do you want to learn?" The six nodded together and learned that they won't get lost anyway, right? Hiren smiled slightly, and taught them how to identify the stars, and then determine the direction. There is a sun in the sky, and there are stars and moons in the dark. As long as the sun, moon, and stars are still there, people will not get lost. Man Bao, what if it rains and there are no stars at night? Hiren laughed and said, it's not easy to meet a rainy day in the desert. If you can meet it, it means that you are very lucky. If so, it's better to stay and wait for the rainy day to pass. Man Bao smiled embarrassedly and asked, if it's not in the desert, but somewhere else, is there any other way to identify the direction besides the sun, moon, and stars? Of course Hiren traveled a lot in his life. He walked alone and with his apprentice. He had experienced all kinds of difficulties and obstacles. He was very skilled at identifying the direction. The six of them learned with great interest, but within an hour, 3 of them dispersed, and the only ones left by Masters Hiren were Manbao Bashan and Yin Or. Bai Erlang and the others gave up. They felt so boring. Watching the stars and the moon was not fun at all. It had to count a lot of things, and their brains were going to explode. Bai Erlang felt that since it was so difficult to identify the direction, they should take an escort when they travel in the future. Just bring an escort who can identify the direction. Bai Shan and Man Bao became more and more interested in learning. When they stopped to rest at night, they could list a lot of formulas by the fire. Sometimes the fire was too dark to look good, so they took out the pen, ink, and paper, made calculations on the paper, and then made gestures against the stars in the sky. Hiren couldn't help but sighed in his heart. He was just teaching them casually, but this time he couldn't help but get serious. Yin he also studied very seriously, but compared to Bai Shan and Man Bao, he was obviously more interested in the Buddhist principles in which Qiren was mixed in. Qiren also felt that he was very thorough, and couldn't help but talk about Buddhism with him. Reason to come. Jiatan has been lying on the carriage, and only gets off the carriage when he is resting. He can sit still now. Seeing that his master completely forgot his appearance, and happily talked back and forth among the 3 teenagers, he couldn't help being silent. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2260. After walking for 3 or 4 days, they entered the desert from the Gobi grassland. Masters Hiren said, I heard from the people in the village that after entering the desert, you only need to walk north for another 3 or 5 days before reaching Jiaokang. Everyone listened to the spirits and could not help speeding up. After the lunch break, everyone drank water and started to move forward staggeringly. Man Bao was sitting in the carriage and dozing off. Because she was sleepy in the afternoon, her head twitched little by little. Suddenly, the alarm bell rang loudly, and Man Bao was startled. Look up. Zhou Liru, who was taking a nap opposite, was taken aback. What's wrong with you, auntie? Man Bao tilted his head, but listened to Keek's emotionless broadcast report. Unknown forces were found within the scanning range, and it was determined that it would have a bad impact on the host's life safety. Please avoid danger after receiving the warning. Emergency escape. Man Bao woke up instantly, and she asked Keek in her mind with a sullen face, what force? Keek said word by word, unknown. A man or a wolf or something. People, Keek simply added in more detail, it's just 20 kilometers away from the southwest of the host, and now it's only 19 kilometers away. There are a total of 189 people. Keek paused and scanned 2 familiar creatures, so he said, one of them is the person the host met in the desert inn, and the other is the person he met while suppressing bandits. According to the name recorded in the video, the latter one Ergo. Man Bao immediately opened the curtain and shouted outside, there is an enemy attack. Nai joins the army. Nikanjun was startled, and the team was immediately alerted. Nikanjun controlled the horse and ran past, but he came to the front. The scout who went to explore the road ahead of time came back quickly, and when he got to the front, he rolled off his horse and said loudly, "My lord, a team from 30 miles to the southwest came to us, very fast, and there was no military flag." Nikanjun turned his head and glanced at Jo Man, and when he saw her nod, he knew they were talking about the same thing. He frowned. If there is no military flag, then it is not a person in the military camp. In such a place, it can only be a caravan and a horse thief, but it is obviously not a caravan at such a fast speed. He glanced at the surrounding environment, immediately selected a place, pointed to a place, and said, "Everyone speed up, move towards taking it out, fast." The carriage accelerated in an instant, and the soldiers and guards escorted the carriage and quickly moved towards the direction pointed by Nikanjun. This is a hollow with high dunes on one side, and they are not in the hollow, but on the spine of the hollow. The high sand dunes that are facing the south will block the impact of the horse team. No one dares to gallop down from above on horseback. If someone comes down from above, the horse and the person will easily fall. So they can only come from one direction. Nikanjun ordered, "Second Lu, take your people to ambush with a tripping rope, and be sure to stop the horse in front." "Yes." One man ordered his own soldiers and ran towards the place with a tripping rope. "Zhang San and Wu Si, bring a bow and arrow and ambush with both wings." "Yes." Nikanjun then looked at Jo Man and several people who had already gotten off the carriage and boarded his precious Ma Dian Dian. He twitched the corners of his mouth and ordered, "Everyone should keep the carriage behind." "Yes." Everyone changed their formation. Most of the soldiers stood in front, the carriage was led to the back, and the guards of the Bai family and Yin family were closely protecting them, and a small number of soldiers were divided on both sides. Nikanjun ordered them to protect the drinking water. As for the luggage with gold and silver jewelry, he glanced at Bai Shanho and asked them to give up. This was agreed at the beginning. If you are really unlucky and encounter a horse thief, you don't need to care about the luggage. The most important thing is to protect the drinking water, which is their life. After making the arrangements, he said to Jo Man who was standing behind him, "Master Jo, why don't you go back to the car?" Man Bao refused, "We want to ride horses, and we can escape fast on horseback." "Then you also go to the back, it's too dangerous here." "This is no problem." Man Bao and the others are still very obedient, so they turned around and rode backwards. The heads of the carriages at the back were all directed towards the north, but they were on guard towards the southwest. Nikan's order was that if they couldn't resist, the coachman would take the carriage and head northeast. When you go to the northwest again, you can always go back to Jiaokang. After the arrangements were made, the scouts flew back again to report, "Sir, they are here." Nikanjun and everyone looked up at the high dune head, and sure enough, people appeared on it after a while, and the people who had just climbed the dune didn't expect them to stop. It whistled, and the people and horses that ran up followed them with "Oh," and with a long knife in their hands, they flew towards them along the spine of the dune. You, Erlangs, go ahead." The eyes of the three-headed were all shining with strange light. The horse thieves cheered each other up, and everyone's arrogance was high. The soldiers and horses of the convoy felt uneasy for a moment. Everyone slowly quieted down. Man Baoxen also raised it high, tightened the reins, and finally reached out and touched Chiji's neck to soothe it. Hiding under the sand, the soldiers who only showed half of their heads and a pair of eyes saw the horses galloping down, and they could not help clenching the ropes in their hands. Suddenly they heard Nikanjun shouting loudly. The rope was taut, and the horses rushing down saw the rope suddenly raised from the sand. Some jumped directly, while others tried to restrain their horses to stop, but those who wanted to restrain their horses stumbled on the people behind, and some stopped. If they don't get it in time, the horse's leg stumbles on the rope, the horse stumbles, and the person on the horse flies forward. The soldiers holding the rope only felt a strong pull and made them rush forward. They knew that they had stumbled on the horse, and they didn't hold back. They turned around and rolled down the sand slope, got up and ran towards the team. The horse thief damaged more than 20 horses in one fell swoop, and the people behind reacted, and the horses were going to chase those people. With the tip of the knife forward, he shouted, "My sons, this is the time to make achievements, rush dash." The soldiers drank and followed Nikanjun to face the horse thieves rushing down, and the archers in ambush also lifted up from the sand, and divided into 3 teams on the left and right to shoot arrows at the horse thieves. It was the first time for Dayu and the others to see such a battle between soldiers and thieves. The battle between horse thieves, and the battle between horse thieves and caravan escorts, was completely different. Not to mention the blood, just say that the casualties vary greatly. Heavy Rain saw that Nikanjun brought his soldiers to meet the horse thieves and mixed with them to kill. He hesitated for a moment, turned his head and asked Joe Man, "Are we going to help?" Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2261. Before Man Bao could answer, he saw a man cut Nikanjun back with one knife, and handed him over to a man beside him, and he rushed towards them with the 3 of them. There is no need to answer this time, and the Heavy Rain brought the brothers to greet him. The knife and the knife collided in mid-air, and the Heavy Rain almost fell off the horse. Fortunately, a brother next to him slashed it with a knife, and the other side leaned back and avoided. With just one glance, Ji Yan, who was lying on the car window, said, "They can't beat him, Master, let me go." Master's Hiran frowned, "Your wounds will heal." Jahan grinned and said, "It's a crack and then heal. This man is a big killer. If he were to rush over, the team might not be able to keep it." Chiron didn't speak anymore. The wound on Ji Yan's back has healed, but it's not yet fully healed. It's better than his leg, but after he got out of the car on one leg, he asked the guard next to him for a horse and rode directly on it. The guard seemed to know that he was powerful and gave him his knife. He didn't want to quit anger, but brought his long stick with him. Jing Kuyan stared at Joe Man from a distance, and met her cold gaze. He grinned at her, glanced at Bai Shan with a stern face, showed him a provocative smile, and then stabbed him in front of him. They cut down all of them, and rushed towards them. Jin Han passed over Joe Man and several others from behind, and went up directly to meet him. Man Bao looked at them for a while, and couldn't help shouting, "Master Jiang." Ji Yan looked back at them, smiled and then moved on. Jing Kuyan frowned and glanced at his bald head, because he was a monk, so he accepted the mercy and swiped at the horse with a knife, wanting to slash his horse. "Cut it down." Ji anger but gently block forward with a stick. Jing Kuyan shook his hand, and when he saw that his knife was blocked by the seemingly light block, he couldn't help being shocked, and when he looked at Ji Yan again, he was much more cautious. Ji angrily chanted the Buddha and sighed, "Why should the donor be aggressive? This is not a caravan, and there is no extra money. If the donor is just asking for money, I can persuade the host to keep some money." Jing Kuyan sneered, "Stop gossiping, monk, if you don't get out of the way, then I'll cut you down together." Ji Yan sighed, and the long stick was slightly raised to block his path. Jing Kuyan understood, the long knife slashed towards Ji Yan's head, and the two instantly fought together. The Heavy Rain brought 7 or 8 people who couldn't stop them, but Ji Yan was stopped by one person. The Heavy Rain, who was entangled by the horse thief brought by Jing Kuyan, looked back and was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was not as good as an injured monk. The last horse thief also rushed down. Some horse thieves broke through the first and second lines of defense and rushed towards the convoy. The remaining soldiers and guards glanced at Joe Man and Bai Shan, leaving a few people to protect the convoy, and also the person with the protected drinking water did not move, and everyone else went up to meet them. Ji Yan had a back injury in the end. Even if his martial arts were strong, his kung fu was tough. After a dozen strokes, he showed signs of decline. When Jin Kuyan pulled his horse to close his position, an arrow shot at the door. He slightly tilted his head to dodge, while blocking Ji's anger with a stick. While looking over, he was facing Zhou Man, who just put down his bow and arrow. He gave her a smile, and his anger became more and more violent. Man Bao took the arrow again. As soon as he showed his figure, he shot at him. Jin Kuyan cut the arrow down. After 2 or 3 times, he was a little irritable. Only when it was exposed, she saw several arrows shot from Zhou Man's side, which she and her friends shot together. He sneered and slashed the arrows calmly, but an arrow flew from the side and shot straight into the neck of the dismounted horse. The horses fell down with a long cry, and Jin Kuyan fell from the horse. As soon as he fell on the sand, he wanted to roll aside and jump. He knew that it was a very dangerous thing to fall off a horse on the battlefield, especially when facing cavalry. Bai Shan put down his bow with a cold face, took out another arrow from the quiver and hooked it up. Together with Man Bao and the others, they aimed at Jin Kuyan and shot him from 2 different directions. Jin Kuyan was a little embarrassed to dodge the arrows before he wanted to jump up. A wooden stick was cleverly placed on the back of his neck. He only felt a pain in the back of his neck, and a flower suddenly appeared in front of him. The stick hit him on the neck repeatedly, and his eyes rolled over. At the moment he fell, there was a shout of "Oh oh" from the top of the hill. Everyone was startled and looked up subconsciously, and saw a group of cavalry appearing just now where the horse thieves rushed down. Direction. Nikanjun's face was covered in blood, and he looked at him with a sullen look. He thought that another group of horse thieves had come, and he was about to let Zhou Man and the others run first, when he saw a flag slowly climbed up the sand dunes, and a flag of Dajin was fluttering. Appeared on the sand dunes, with a big Mongolian character embroidered on the other side. Some soldiers have already shouted, "It's the Shazhu army, your lord, someone from Yumengwan. The Menjia army is here." Nikanjun was stunned for a moment before shouting loudly, "Brothers, leave these bastards behind, go ahead. Go ahead." Little General Meng also slashed down from the sand dunes and shouted loudly, "Children, go ahead." With the soldiers and horses facing the following, they rushed down. Man Bao was stunned for a moment and then said to Bai Shan, who ran back, "Let's pay the medical bill. It seems that there is no need to escape, it can be left for everyone to heal." Bai Shan responded with a hello and asked the guards who protected the carriage to lift a few boxes down, set up a medical tent, and go to the front to drag the wounded soldiers back for treatment. Mr. Zhuang also came down to help with his old arms and legs. He rolled up his sleeves and started to make a fire and boil water. Some soldiers have already carried over the wounded soldiers who fell on the battlefield. With the addition of the Meng family army, the speed was much faster. The 2 sides converged and quickly captured all the horse thieves, and none of them ran away. Injured soldiers and guards do not need to be carried by others. Those who can walk are directly brought over to wait for the bandage to stop the bleeding. Those who cannot walk are carried up by other soldiers and guards. Man Bao and the others got busy, and Bai Shan and Bai Erlang also gained experience. They first helped to deal with minor injuries, scrubbed the wound and then applied medicine. If sutures were needed, they would find Man Bao and Zhou Liru. The 2 of them were basically responsible for suturing to stop the bleeding. Masters Hiran watched it for a while, and then asked Man Bao for a pair of needles and threads, and they could even sew them up. It's not good looking, but the texture is right. Sure enough, those who know medical skills can always do everything. It's not uncommon for a little general to be scolded by this kind of thing. Isn't that all the military doctors in the military camp save people like this? So he just took a look and went to Nikanjun, but the heavy rain sat on the side with his wounds in his mouth, dumbfounded. It was the first time that this group of former bandits and guards had seen such a treatment scene. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2262. Nikanjun counted the number of casualties, and then took the knife and kicked Ergo out, and pressed his foot on his head. He leaned over and stared at his eyes and asked, "Can I catch you once? Can't I catch you a second time? You should stay away from me, fool." Ergo looked at him with red eyes, spit out bloody spit for a long time, and said in a hoarse voice, "You are too high on yourself. If you are lucky, you just got away a few times, you think you can enter alive. Desert." Nikanjun was furious and had already bandaged the wounded. Bai Shan, who was covered in blood, came to see the situation and said lightly, "Luck is also a kind of strength." Right at the feet of Nikanjun, Urge raised his eyes hard to look at Bai Shan, grinned, swept towards Nikanjun and said, "It's just brute force. If it wasn't for the two of them, I would have killed you in Liangzhou." Bai Shandao, although I am glad that you agree with me, you are wrong about this sentence. Even if you were not paralyzed by us at the time, and acted immediately, the more than 100 of us are not decorations. Whoever dies will die. Life isn't sure yet. Bai Shan stretched out his hand and patted Nikanjun, and said, "Don't step on him, it's pointless. The most urgent thing is to ask how he got out of the Liangzhou prison, and where did he get his hands. I remember the period at that time. The prefect has said that the entire mountain of horse thieves has been wiped out. Even if there are omissions, there won't be so many, right?" "I know," General Meng, who had been sitting silently beside him, interjected, "but can you heal me first?" Only then did everyone see that he had been slashed on his waist and abdomen, and he was pressing at this time, but his clothes were also dyed through. Bai Shan was taken aback and hurriedly said, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? I can't handle this. You wait, I'll find Man Bao." It took a long time for Man Bao to come. There was no way. The patient in her hand was at an urgent point. She hurried over when she had finished dealing with the patient in her hand. General Meng's face was a little pale, but he pressed it properly. The blood has slowly stopped, and the main incision is not very deep. Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief when he saw it. He carefully unbuttoned his clothes and began to clean the wound. Bai Shan moved a torch over to illuminate her. General Meng watched as the two gathered in front of his stomach to discuss. "It's dangerous that the incision is not deep, nor is it very long, otherwise the scar will not look good." Bai Shan, "Who will look at his belly?" Man Bao, "His wife. That's also someone's boudoir interest. Don't be suspicious, just in case someone just likes it. After all, this is a trace of meritorious achievement." "General Meng, can you not discuss in front of him? He simply has to indicate his existence." Man Bao, who was stitching him up, raised his head and glanced at him. "Does it hurt?" General Meng nodded. "It hurts." "It hurts," Man Bao said. "How can it not hurt after so much blood?" Little General Meng, he thought she had a way to make him not hurt by asking this. Man Bao quickened his speed, filled his stomach with his hiss, and then put on the hemostatic medicine. She handed over the dressing to Bai Shan, turned around and went back to see the other injured. Seeing that his eyes had been following Man Bao's baying, Bai Shan asked him, "Does it look good?" General Meng nodded and said, "This Imperial Dr. Zhou really lives up to his reputation. He is very courageous, and he is different from the little lady I have ever seen." Bai Shan tied a knot, smiled at him and said, "It's my future wife." The smile on General Meng's face fell, and he became serious. "Brother Bai, don't misunderstand, I have no other intentions. I have heard that Zhou Tai has been engaged, and it turns out to be Brother Bai." Bai Shan smiled slightly and said, "I know, but I'm just glad that you agree with her so much. We're going to Jiaokang, and we'll go together next time. It's easy for everyone to have a good relationship." Little General Meng frowned, How did you know we were going to Jiaokang? Does he remember that he didn't say it? Bai Shan smiled and said, isn't it? By the way, have their den of thieves been suppressed? He glanced over the soldiers he brought, and asked, you traveled all the way from Yumengwan, didn't you just bring so many people? Of course not. They came to support Angzi. He brought 1,000 troops, and the rest were behind. These were cavalry. They rushed to the rescue because they knew they were here to chase the messenger team. But before he had time to say these things, how did Bai Shan know? Bai Shan has already asked, just now the Major General said he knew the origin of these horse thieves. Only then did little General Meng return to his senses, and after a hum he said, the one at the head is Jin Kuyan, who was originally a general under Ba Zhou's command. He used to be a slave, and he was promoted because of his bravery. Bai Shan did his homework before he came to the western regions. He had a good understanding of the forces in the western regions. He understood as soon as he heard it, so after Bazhuo died, he became a horse thief. General Meng nodded, the two people you sent back were very tough, and they refused to use the punishment, but they also revealed a lot of information when they talked about it, and you mentioned that you had met before. Those people, we have been paying attention, and we will know when they enter the city. General Meng said, we later set up traps outside the city to capture them, but unfortunately let him escape with a few people. We captured some people at the time, and when there were too many people, we asked them out without much punishment. General Meng glanced at Jin Kuyan, who was still in a coma, and actually felt a little sympathetic to him. He already knew what happened to him during this period of time from his subordinates, which can be summed up in 3 words, bad luck. He had never seen anyone with worse luck than him when he was so old. Really, after 3 trips back and forth, he obviously didn't go the wrong way on the first trip, but he was staggered. General Meng also frankly pointed at Urge, who had a bruised nose and a swollen face, and said, this man was also Bazhuo's subordinate back then, and he was considered a confidant. When Bazhuo fled back then, he asked him to take away a batch of gold and silver. Make a comeback in the future. Jin Kuyan's subordinates also know a lot. The main reason is that there is no need to hide this kind of thing. They went to Liangzhou this time for gold and silver jewelry. Such a happy thing has to be publicized. Therefore, many people knew the whole story, and when General Meng interrogated them, he told them all like pouring beans in a bamboo tube. He said, back then, he took a group of people, but they separated a lot. When he arrived in Liangzhou, Bazhuo was killed by the Tibetans. When the news came, he hid the batch of gold and silver. Knowing he was the only one, and later he joined a nearby caravan as a horse thief with them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2263. There was news of smallpox in Xiaozu half a year ago, and people started to fluctuate in various places, and he wanted to make a comeback, but the caravan leader he followed didn't want to attack the city, he just wanted to loot the passing merchants to make money. I don't know whether to say that Ergo is too ambitious, or that the leader of the horse thief is too low-spirited. Anyway, the two are different. The horse thief's boss didn't like Ergo, and wanted to squeeze the second boss, but the second boss was more ruthless and wanted to replace the boss, so he quietly recruited people. It's a pity that the third master is absolutely loyal to the master. Most of the bandits in the cottage are also generous to them, so there are not many people who are willing to switch to Urge. He estimated that the odds of winning were not high, and he knew that Jin Kuyan had a lot of people here, so he sent someone to send him a letter, asking Jin Kuyan to help him, and then he was willing to divide Bazhuo's treasure into 7. To make. Then they came. Bai Shan glanced at them and asked, then why are they staring at us? General Meng stared at him and asked, you don't know? Their people confessed that the treasures they hid in the coffins were picked up, and the prefect of Liangzhou took the treasures and used them as military resources. No matter how powerful they are, they can't be stealing things from the army, but I heard that besides Duan Inspector, there was a group of people at that time, because they also participated in the bandit suppression, and it was the treasure they found, so they distributed a lot of gold and silver jewelry. Little General Meng stared at Bai Shan and said word by word, I heard that those people are you. Bai Shan, oh, it's the treasure in the coffin. He said indifferently, it's just some gold and silver, we can't see it, where did these rumors come from? Hearing his answer, General Meng was stunned, you have no point. Bai Shan frowned slightly, they said I broke up. Obviously he didn't deny it, but General Meng subconsciously thought that he had no points, and he frowned slightly, could it be that the Liangzhou army framed you? Bai Shan said sternly, Inspector Duan is not that kind of person. Could it be someone under him who is spreading the word? Or? Bai Shan turned his head to look at the dazed Ergo, squinted and said, or was he tricked by someone? When little General Meng looked at Bai Shan, his eyes were immediately wrong, and he said with a sympathetic expression, if this is the case, then you are the unlucky ones, not worse than that Jing Kuyan. Bai Shan, thank you for your invitation, they are not unlucky at all. Ergo, whose hands and feet were tied, also heard these words, and he shook his head in disbelief. Jing Kuyan, who just woke up and heard this conversation, darkened his eyes. If Bai Shan and the others didn't take any gold and silver jewelry, what was the reason for them tossing around all the way? As soon as Jing Kuyan made a move, everyone came over. General Meng felt that the stab wound on his waist and abdomen was very painful. He covered his stomach and said to Nikenjun, be careful of him, this person is very fierce. Of course Nikenjun knew that, after all, he couldn't beat the opponent. Fortunately, he was tied very strongly. Fei had the most ropes, from the shoulders to the heels, so he could only roll on the sand at most. Jing Kuyan struggled for a while, and found that the rope would tighten when he moved, so he lay on the ground and refused to move. Nikenjun stepped forward and poked him and asked, what do you have to say? Jing Kuyan's eyes swept over these remnants of them, and sneered, it's too early to be proud, it's not certain who will die first. Nikenjun snorted angrily, you are all fish now. Jing Kuyan sneered again and again. Bai Shan felt a little uneasy when he saw this, and his behavior didn't look like an empty threat. He turned his head and asked little General Meng, you have picked out their den of thieves. Jing Kuyan, who just woke up, missed this section, so he couldn't help but slightly rounded his eyes and turned his head to look at General Meng, but in the end he could only see half of Bai Shan's body, and couldn't see the person in front of him at all. Seeing him like this, Bai Shan kindly stretched out his hand and grabbed his neck and pulled the man forward, letting him see little General Meng. Only then did Jing Kuyan see the person who was talking to Bai Shan just now, and he said angrily, little yellow-haired boy, it's you. General Meng snorted at him, if you scold me again, I will still be a defeated general. Jing Kuyan sneered, who is the defeated general? If it weren't for you to bully the less. When you started beating us, you used more to bully less, Nikenjun interjected, sneering, 50 steps to laugh at 100 steps, what qualifications do you have to bring up the topic of more than less? Bai Shan also smiled and said, it's enough to win. He lowered his head slightly and stared at Jing Kuyan's face, thinking carefully, aren't you the biggest horse thief in the neighborhood? When you fall, the caravan that had to rely on you before might have to celebrate with your forehead. Jing Kuyan just sneered and did not speak, with a confident look on his face. Ergo, who was beside him, wanted to speak at first, but thinking of the humiliation Jing Kuyan had done to him along the way, he stopped talking. Forget it, why would such a person save him? Bai Shan stared at his face tightly, and looked at Ergo from the corner of his eyes. He instantly affirmed that Jing Kuyan was really confident. He thought for a while, then got up and went to Zhiran. Master, the biggest horse thief in the vicinity is the one who set up the level? Who else can compete with them, even higher than them? Zhiran thought for a moment and then said, the village chief said that they are the most powerful, so they directly occupied their houses, and then drove them out, then the whole small town is now theirs. He said, although that small town is not as good as the old Lilan ancient city, it is not small. Their ability to occupy that small town shows their strength. If there is a similar power nearby, it is impossible for them to monopolize the small town. When Bai Shan heard this, he became more and more certain, is that from outside? His heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but ask, isn't Tubo still far from here? Zhiran's heart jumped, and he whispered, it's not very far, and the Angzi army is limited now, so it may not be able to take care of this. Obviously, he also understood what Bai Shan meant. Bai Shan stood there for a while, but turned around to find Nikanjun and General Meng. We can't stay here, we have to rush to Jiaokang immediately. General Meng's personal soldiers carried a box for him to lean against. At this time, he leaned back and rested on the box. Hearing this, he yawned and said, then we have to be able to go, you see our casualties. With so much, we can't leave us remnants behind, can we? But don't worry, we won't stay too much. We will leave for another day tomorrow. Bai Shan glanced at him, then turned to look at Jing Kuyan, stared condescendingly into his eyes and asked, you have cooperated with Tubo, will Tubo come to attack Angzi? Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2264. Little General Meng was startled, he sat up straight, and the wound made a hiss. He asked in pain, what? After asking, he immediately stared at Jing Kuyan. Jing Kuyan's face was very indifferent, but General Meng still saw a moment of astonishment in his face, and his eyes were slightly widened just now. General Meng immediately raised his head and looked at the shocked Nikanjun, and the two immediately said, have a rest for the night, and we will leave tomorrow. Nikanjun turned to look at the prisoners, and said with deep eyes, take care of them all tomorrow morning. Bai Shan frowned slightly and wanted to stop him, but General Meng had already said, no, they are already prisoners and cannot be killed. Nikanjun said, at the moment of the enemy, keeping these people will do more harm than good. Once their reinforcements charge up, they will attack us. It's all about recruiting. General Meng looked up and stared at him. These prisoners have already been captured. If they kill them again, they will violate the court order. But killing prisoners before the battle, as long as no one specifically sued for such a thing, who would know? He hadn't let them all follow suit. Bai Shan coughed lightly, you can try to convince them. They said we believed it? What if they turned against the tide temporarily? Bai Shandao, don't you always need cannon fodder when you are dealing with the battalion? This is indeed not a violation, and General Meng stopped talking. Nikanjun still didn't want to keep those prisoners, but what General Meng said, Bai Shan agreed, and Bai Shan agreed. Zhou Man naturally had an opinion with Bai Shan. After all, she was the chief officer, and he still had to listen to a certain extent. Her. Nikanjun stopped talking. General Meng consciously won, his face softened a lot, and he explained to him, Nikanjun, our left general is a Turk, if he knows that we are killing prisoners in the western regions, not only you and me, but even my father will be charged. Of. Nikanjun then remembered that the left leader was coming, sighed and nodded, okay. But they didn't take all the prisoners away. Nikanjun's gaze swept over the remnants, and decided to leave these seriously injured horse thieves tomorrow. Without water and horses, they shouldn't live long. That's not much different from killing them. The key is that they don't need to do anything. Man Bao took care of the open wound for Ji Yan, but fortunately he did not add any new wounds, which was a piece of good news. She got up and twisted her sore neck, and then she asked Zhou Liru to deal with the injuries on the horse thieves. Zhou Liru didn't feel anything at all, and walked over with the medicine box, but Lu Huan was stunned, grabbed her and said, "No, do you still want to treat the horse thief? Man Baodao, even if the medicine is not used for them, it is better to treat the wound. The suture will not only stop the bleeding, but also heal quickly. She is a doctor, can't watch people bleed to death in front of her eyes." Zhou Liru couldn't see it either, so the two went to treat their wounds. When Bai Shan saw it, he asked Bai Erlang and the others to follow him to help, and said, "They all know some Chinese. Tell them more about Princess Jinjiang's concubine." Princess Jinjiang, Bai Erlang, who was being asked to recite the royal family relationship spectrum some time ago, thought hard for a while before he remembered. "Oh, left leader Salai, what did he do?" Bai Shan said quietly, "He is a Turk." Shiro Yin Or smiled and said to Bai Erlang, "Let's go, he is trying to recruit security. But I am afraid that one night will not be able to attract people." But they still got their favor by staying up all night to treat wounds and stop bleeding, and the tension that had been somewhat eased a lot. Man Bao was busy for half the night, and finally just simply washed his face and hands, then took off his coat and fell into the car to sleep. Everyone else is about the same. The next morning, he took someone to make some dry food. After everyone had eaten, they would set off immediately. Man Bao and the others let the carriages out to the seriously wounded soldiers and the dead soldiers. Nikang Jun specially asked people to dig a big pit to bury them. He was not sure whether the sand pit would be moved or whether people would be revealed later. Come out, but at least they won't be bitten by wolves when they are still fresh. Nikang Jun put away their signs, turned around and left. Man Bao and others rode on their horses, looked back, and then hit the horse and left. Ergo and Jin Kuyan were thrown into a car, and Nikang Jun left many seriously injured prisoners. No one objected. They did not kill everyone, but took some of the prisoners on the road, which surprised them enough. If they would kill all the men and take only the women. But, looking at the cloth wrapped around them, the prisoners didn't know whether to be moved or not. Anyway, their mood was very complicated for a while, and they didn't want to speak for the time being. Man Bao and Bai Shan didn't have time to think about this for a while, so they didn't feel sentimental for a long time. The two rode their horses and Nikang Jun walked around a carriage, and General Meng leaned on the carriage to talk to them. If reinforcements arrive, you should just run for your life, we will block it for you." Man Bao looked moved. General Meng is really righteous. General Meng raised his hand and said, "How dare you praise me like this?" He said, "You can't let your civil servants and a group of students fight to kill the enemy, right?" Nikang Jun complained to him, "Since General Meng has brought 1,000 troops, why not bring more people here? Most of the people who stay at the checkpoint are infantry soldiers. Don't I want to chase you? Come on, how can they catch up?" General Meng said, "If I say it's better to return to the checkpoint, let's reduce our luggage. It only takes 2 days to go back quickly, but it will take at least 3 days from here to Jiaokang. And..." He disgustedly glanced out at the carriage loaded with luggage, and said, "You have too much baggage. It will take at least 4 days to go to Jiaokang at this speed." Bai Shan said with an expressionless face, "Going south from here for 2 days, I'm afraid of bumping into the reinforcements of the Tubo head-on, but going north from here, I think it will always take time for them to catch up. There are people I left behind at the checkpoint. What if there are too many face-to-face reinforcements and you can't keep it?" Bai Shan said, "It will be too late to ask for help from the Angzi army. And how stupid is he to flee in the direction of the Tubo reinforcements? What if they encounter the Tubo reinforcements before they reach the level? This possibility is still very high. Even the little General Meng dare not pat his chest and say that there is no danger. No need to think about Nai joining the army, he just chose to go to Jiaokang. A good horse does not eat grass, and a hero naturally does not turn back. He is not that stupid. After walking back, he has to go to Jiaokang again.